All right, so on our last video, we talked about the importance of fully loading your back cast, letting that line go completely until it goes straight out back. Your rod stays back with it so that you have one motion going forward using the entirety of your rod. And then as you go forward, you break that wrist forward and you finish the cast forward. This is what that looks like. Back, break that wrist forward, break that wrist forward. It goes out using the entirety of the rod. That's where you want to be. But now, let me tell you about something that I call rod creeping. And this is something that I see periodically when I've taken people fishing. It generally happens to beginners and intermediate anglers. What they do is as that line goes to load, they don't keep the rod back, they bring it almost right here. So then they try, once it loads, to finish the cast like that. They try to finish the cast like that. So how does that show up in your cast? A lot of times I'll have anglers say to me, why is my fly catching the fly line? Why am I having these large loops? Why isn't it just really going on the way out? So I explain to them what they're doing wrong. I explain that they're doing this. However, the only problem is if they've been doing that, they've probably been doing that for quite some time. It's created repetition. It's a habit, and it's something that we've got to break. So let's talk about how we fix that. The first thing that I do is I get my camera phone and I film them doing it. They can't believe that they're bringing that rod here and trying to finish it. It's like a light bulb goes on and they're like, you've got to be kidding me. I had no idea I'm doing that. So that's the first point, making sure they see that that's what they're doing. Now, how do we fix this? There's a few methods that I use. Some work better than others, but a lot of times what I'll do is I'll stand at the bow of the boat with my angler, and when his arm goes back, I will apply a little bit of pressure to his forearm to keep that rod back. Then they go forward with one motion. Keep that rod back, then they go forward with one motion. That works, but that's a little awkward. The second thing that I do that actually works quite well is I will watch them and I will tell them, keep that rod back. I will actually say, keep the rod back, back, back. I see it fully load, then I tell them to go forward. So I will stand there, back, 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 then fully load and go forward. Now that takes somebody to help you because you've got to have somebody who can see it. Fully load, now forward. Now, the third thing is something that I do that I don't recommend that you do on a large scale. As I've told you before, I don't like to look behind me and watch my cast load because then you can't turn around to really see where it's going to go. But if you want to break this habit, don't be afraid to watch it. I can fully see it load, then I go forward. I can watch it. Two things happen. One, I can watch the line load, and two, I can keep an eye on my fly rod to make sure it stays back. After all, that's the key. I want that rod to stay back. That line's fully loaded. Then you carry it and transfer it forward. Stay back, then go forward. The other thing that happens when they creep the rod, and this is the last thing that we'll touch on, you notice that when you're here, you end up doing this. They get very large loops in their line. Now, normally what happens is your shooting line is above your running line. I have about a 3-foot loop in my line. I'm not one of these guys that can do this little bitty loop, so I don't even care to try. But as you generate the line speed, that shooting head connected to the butt section, connected to the fly, will go and it will unravel into a nice straight position as it hits the water. It will not do that when you creep the rod because you're asking it to do it with just 50% of the rod going forward. There's not enough. Generally what happens with 50%, that fly line will go over here, it'll lean down, it'll try to catch and then go back over. It'll actually lean down before it goes back over instead of that straight motion as it just uncurls and lays flat. It bounces. You don't want that to happen. Nothing good can come from a creeping fly line. If you think you're okay with this now, when you go to start saltwater fly fishing for tarpon with 11 weights and 12 weights, sinking lines, bigger flies, maybe windier conditions, you will not be able to make those 40, 50, 60, 70-foot casts that you need to make. This is something that you want to get away from as quick as possible. So again, good cast, fully loaded, rod back. Good cast, fully loaded, rod back. Don't do this. Don't do this. You just don't want that in your cast. Get rid of that as soon as possible. Use those 2 or 3 things that I talked about. That'll help you to fix it because after all, we want to take advantage of every opportunity that we get on the flats to throw to that tarpon. And if you are rod creeping, you are going to be losing a majority or possibly a very large amount of opportunities because you're not going to be able to get the line there. So let's go ahead. Let's concentrate. Let's do it right. Let that fly line go straight out. Take advantage of every opportunity that you get and chances are you're going to get better casts and hook more fish.